Don't forget to like and subscribe.
Ladies and gentlemen, theater lovers, story shapers, and anyone who's ever watched a classic play and thought, we can do better. Buckle up, because today on Coffee with Chris, we're joined by an artist who is redefining what the word creator even means. Patricia freaking Allison. This is a woman who doesn't tiptoe into the world of theater. She storms in, grabs the classics by the collar, and says, "All right, Shakespeare, move over. I got something to say." She's the brilliant mind behind Richard III, the disability-centered, canon-shaking reimagining that Toronto is still talking about. It's a show that didn't just challenge the traditions of Shakespeare, it body-checked them, rewrote the rules, and opened a universe where disabled bodies are not just included, they're powerful, central, and unstoppable. She followed it up with Resolution Season, a holiday show with a disability lens that proves joy, humor, wit, and representation all belong in the same room and on the same stage. Now, Patricia earned her MFA in dance from York University, where she dove into the adaptation theory, feminist frameworks, queer perspectives, and the art of flipping every classical trope upside down just to see how it would look. When she creates, she doesn't bring a new voice to the canon, she builds a whole new system. Now, in 2017, Patricia was diagnosed with multiple sclerosis, but she rose. She adapted, she reclaimed her body, her artistry, her voice, and turned her own journey into fuel for a movement. Now, today, she is a fierce advocate for disabled artists and a real life example of what it looks like when courage meets creativity. Across Toronto and beyond, Patricia is known as the artist who blends brain with fire, research with rebellion, movement with meaning, and heart with humor. Her work doesn't whisper, well, it echoes. It expands, it invites people in who were never invited before. This is a theater maker who asks, what if classics grew with us? What if the stage reflected the world as it truly is? What if we stopped adapting ourselves to the art and started adapting the art to us? So today we're not just meeting a playwright, not just a choreographer, not just a director, not just a creator. You're meeting a force, a disruptor, an artistic thunderbolt who's already changing the future of Canadian theater. Give a huge, roaring, ovation-worthy welcome to the unstoppable, unforgettable, the extraordinary Patricia freaking Allison. Ladies and gentlemen, theater lovers, story shapers, and anyone who's ever watched. Patricia, thank you so much for your time and welcome to the show.
Thank you so much for that introduction. What a gracious and beautiful way to start an interview. You like really like hype up your guests and get them ready to talk about themselves.
Well, I understand that freaking is probably not your legal middle name.
No.
However, I think we're just going to let that one roll for now.
I love it. I love it. Thank you so much.
Patricia, I want to go back in time with you. I love going back to everyone's origin story. Where did Patricia the artist begin?
Yeah, I mean, that's such a great question because I'm actually currently sitting in a hotel room in Ottawa. And I'm in Ottawa because my wife, who's a stage manager, is doing a contract at the National Arts Center. But Ottawa is like where it all began. Like, this is where I grew up. So I grew up outside of Ottawa in a little suburb called Orleans. And that's where I started to like kind of get my feet into dancing. That was sort of like my first pathway into the arts. And then from there, I auditioned. I got into Canterbury High School, which I think was like a really pivotal moment for me in terms of like leaning into pursuing the arts as a career. And then I moved out to Montreal to go to school and went to a contemporary dance conservatory out there. And I've been in Toronto now for about, I want to say like 15 years. It's been like a while. I keep saying I'm like new to Toronto, but I'm actually not new to Toronto. I've been there for like, I think 15 years now.
No, I love that. Now you said that you're Toronto, but you're back home right now, which is how I'll
Yeah.
phrase this. But you said you were in dance. Now I want to ask,
Mhm.
why dance? Why not puppetry?
Mm,
Why not,
mm.
playing a triangle or the cowbell? Why dance?
Yeah, I think like a little bit to what you like alluded to in my bio, dance isn't the only thing I do because I'm just like a really curious person and I have this attitude where I'm like, oh, I can do that. And I'll like dive into something and then quickly realize like I can't do it and it's hard, but like I love kind of trying new things. So dance because I was a really physical kid and like you needed to put me in a room. I wanted to like dance to all the pop songs. Like dance was like a great way to sort of get me to release my energy, but I kind of always had the theater bug. Like I was always really jealous of the kids that were actors or the playwrights and the directors. So even when I was in high school, I was on like the high school theater improv team because I was like, I want to be like, whose line is it anyway? Like I saw those guys up there and I was like, I also want to do that. So I was like also on the improv team. And because a lot of my friends were in the drama department, they let me work on their theater show. So I was doing like choreography for narrative, which I thought was really interesting. And that's sort of like where the Shakespeare piece came in, because I was always like really interested in doing Shakespeare, but I always knew I wanted to do it in a different way. So I feel like sometimes I say I do things by accident, but I had someone recently say, like, what if you replace the word accident with organically? And I was like, yeah, I organically shift. It's like I'll get super curious about kind of how camera works and how choreography can work with a camera. Then all of a sudden, I'm like operating a camera on a little like dance film shoot while directing it. And I kind of see all these things as like feeding into the same curiosity question with different ways of getting there. So my body is the way that I like start to tell all my stories, but I'm adoring learning all these other mediums. Like you picked up on like Richard III and Resolution Season, which are like my first forays into playwriting, and learning more about playwriting has taught me more about choreography, has taught me more about direction. Like I see them all as being the same pieces.
I love that you've said this where you went to dance to get the energy out, to get that movement happening. And then you said, hey, I think I can do that over there too. And I think I can do this. And organically, we're just saying that we can do all of this, which is fantastic. And
Mhm.
then you're, trial by firing squad. So
Mhm.
when you were doing improv and when you were doing theater, what was it about those versus dance? Like dance was the movement, dance was to get everything going, but was there
Mhm.
anything about the spotlight or the instant laugh through improv that
Mm.
you just didn't get through dance?
uh yes, probably. I would say the thing that sort of hooked me was character, which like and this is like something I talk a lot. I'm like anybody who's worked with me has seen me do these hand gestures before, but it's like in dance because it's so rigid and you're learning like exactly where to place your arms, you're sort of like imbuing character into the gesture. But there was something I found so fascinating, especially in improv, because sometimes in improv, we'd just be like getting up there and doing like one character after the other. And there's something about like starting with character and coming down into where gesture lands. And if you're working with dancers or you're working with actors, they're like approaching the same story. So you're like getting to the same baseline, but they're approaching it in two different ways. So sometimes I have to like flip my brain depending on who I'm collaborating with or who I'm working with to be like, okay, how am I going to get that person to the story? Um, and it often is just like two different sensibilities, two different impulses, like two different catalysts for like getting there. Um, and I find that so cool. Like I find it so cool the different tools or the different methodologies that we use to get to where that story is. And I feel like that's what I'm the most passionate about is like figuring out all those ways. I've never tried puppet, but like I'll bet you $10 I could spend 10 years obsessing over puppet. And like I would probably land at the same place just with a different way of getting there.
When do you feel that theater became the medium for you? You were dancing, you
Mm,
wanted to do
mm.
improv, you saw the guys, you saw the character-driven narratives, but where was that light bulb moment for you where you said, "No, you know what? This feels the most at home for me."
I think it's several things. So in the piece as a performer, there's like a very logical step. It was like being a dancer always felt temporary because you're always racing that clock of age. So it was like the reason why I moved to Montreal when I was fresh out of high school. Like I graduated high school and 2 weeks later, I started at a conservatory in Montreal. And the reason why that felt so urgent is I was like, you're only young once. Like everyone knows when it comes to the facility and the body of dance. And like, I also live in a body that's not a traditional dancer. Like I'm tall, I'm wide. Like no one thought I would have a dance career. So it felt urgent. Like I have to do this now while I'm young. And that was great. I had like a really wonderful time doing it. And not only was I getting older, but then, as you said, I was diagnosed with multiple sclerosis. So, like that rigor that you need in your body in order to train as like a top level dancer, that time for me was over. So it was like naturally that like the dancer aspect sort of like went to the wayside. And I wouldn't say that I've necessarily like left choreography. It's just not where I'm getting the most opportunity right now. Like I still apply for like either dance grants or like choreographic opportunity, but it's like the theater community has sort of just like embraced me and it's where my opportunity is right now. But like I'm always low key working on choreography. Like it's still part of my process. And I think part of it too is that in working in theater as someone who comes from a dance background, I've always really felt like anyone can dance. And like,
Mhm.
and that also now translates to like my disability practice. But I think one of the reasons why I've been so embraced in a theater space is because I find it really interesting to figure out how to work with the bodies I have in front of me because I've never been a choreographer that's like you have to execute XYZ. I've always been a choreographer that's like, okay, what can your body do?
Hmm.
Let's do what your body can do in the best way possible. And like I think there's something about that approach that like theater directors or like other actors really responded to, being like, great, I've always felt judgment from
Right.
dance. And I'm approaching it in a way that I'm like, there's no judgment. Let's just see what your body can do because everybody can do something, even if it's just like a head looking over, even if it's just a shift of eye, but that can all be choreographic.
So when we talk about your different mediums, we talk about the dance, we talk about the theater, we talk about being in front and behind, but we also
Mhm.
you also have this extensive writing piece as well. I want to ask you, what does performance give you on stage,
Mm.
in front of that audience that writing or academia doesn't?
Mm. Interesting. There's something about writing and I like said this to my wife a little while ago. I'm like, there's something about writing that is like refreshingly non-collaborative. Like you just get to fully execute a piece of art. And like playwriting, I think is one thing, but like let's say short stories, you get to execute a piece of art from start to finish 100% within what you envisioned. And there's something beautiful about that. And I would say, like, in writing and in creative writing in particular, that's the only place that that exists for me. And then there's something also really beautiful, like because playwriting is one of my newer things that I do. There's something really beautiful about handing a piece of writing over and then having an actor teach you something about it. So, like, they read it out loud, and you're like, oh, like that doesn't read the way I thought it would. Or, like, actually, the word that you accidentally just said is better for this spot. So, like, there's like writing as like a solo practice and like no collaboration, and then there's writing as much of a collaborative process as doing live theater is. um there's something about performing where I feel like it also is like the ultimate collaboration. When I say that, I mean kind of less in dance, because in dance, things are often like, I'm just going to execute this top to tail. But there's something about acting where, or like being on stage, or even just like hosting like a fundraiser or something, where that audience is so much a part of the process, and those reactions and the shifts that you get from them is such fuel for like when you're up there. And it's actually really interesting because the past 2 years I've been on the jury for the Dora Awards, which are
Ooh.
like the theater award in
Yeah.
Toronto. And so I've seen so much theater and had the opportunity sitting there in the audience to sort of like look around at the experience of being in communal space and like what it is like when someone's like cell phone will go off and then half the room groans that that person's cell phone has gone off. And I'm like, there's something so beautiful about that moment, though, because we're all bodies in space and all of our bodies have needs. They have sounds, they have like things that happen. So there's something I really love about being so live and so present with other people because I could just read a book at home or I could
Mhm.
just watch TV at home. No one's cell phone's going to go off in my living room. But like, there's something so beautiful about that. Even when it's like a big mistake that's really distracting, like we're present.
I love that you've said this where you're in the theater, you watch all the theater, and the person's cell phone goes off or text message, whatever it is, and you can
Mhm.
hear the person next to them groan, like, oh my gosh, you've disrupted my experience.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
it's so neat because when you're in the live theater, you become like this POV of the camera,
Hmm.
right? You're
Hmm.
going to look at whatever you want as opposed to a movie or a TV show where they're telling you this is what I want you to see. You get to
Hmm.
decide.
Hmm.
When we look at these stories and when we look at your theater experience and playwriting is new, but when we look at some of the classical texts, when you
Hmm.
look at telling a story, short story, long format, playwriting, dance, improv, haunted puppetry, whatever you choose to go through,
Yeah.
what's the first thing that you look at? Do you look at a gap in the story, a gap in the market, an assumption, or a twist on a tale, potential for reinvention? What does that spark look like for you?
Mm, I think it like, I'm going to use the word organic again. I think it comes more organically than that. And it often comes down to like something about the human experience that I'm ruminating on. So, like this past year, or like for the longest time, one of the pieces of Shakespeare's that I've wanted to do was Timon of Athens. And when you think of Timon of Athens, it's like one of his lesser known works. And the thing that I've always loved about it is how, I'm going to say how thin it is. Like it actually it's known as like one of his lesser like not good pieces, but I've always been obsessed with it because I'm like I saw an opportunity within the work where I'm like it's so thin. Folks don't have like a huge relationship to it. I think I could do Timon of Athens with no text and only movement. So for years I've been like ruminating on that idea. But then at Shakespeare in the Ruff, as we were sort of doing like our multi-year season planning, we were talking about the like economic time that we're all living. It's like living in 2025 with like billionaires and people shooting themselves into space and like what the world collapsing. We just sort of like started to talk about that theme and it being something we wanted to interrogate. And then because Timon was sort of like sitting in the background, it was like, hey, you know who's a really wealthy guy who it might be interesting to like layer on top some of these like contemporary ideas onto as like an exploration. So we, as like Shakespeare in the Rough, jumped on top of it, and Christine Hanula James, no, sorry, Christine Horn and Nathaniel Hanula James rewrote it, putting a female. We had Tiffany of Athens at the center of it. So, like, kind of approaching it through a feminist lens is really interesting. And we knew that we wanted to change the ending of Timon because the regular ending of Timon is actually quite bleak. But we were like, we don't think if we're exploring these contemporary themes that a bleak ending is what we want. So, like, it sort of comes in layers. And I feel like for me, it doesn't come all at the same time. It's sort of like every piece that I've worked on or every idea that I've had sort of like comes in these layers of like, what are the things I'm currently ruminating on? What exists in classical text for me to layer on top of and to play with? And when are the conditions right? Because sometimes you have a great idea, but you're like, ooh, that like wouldn't read in this year. Like this isn't the cultural climate to do that piece right now.
So let's stay in this vein of the Shakespeare world.
Yeah.
Let's jump back a little bit for Richard III. It was bold. It
Mhm.
was a brilliant reimagining. What sparked the idea to approach Shakespeare through a disabled lens?
So I love doing everything through a disabled lens, but there's something about Richard III in particular being like the most notable disabled character in Shakespeare's canon. And the fact that at the time when and like, don't quote me on these stats, but it's something like at the time when I started to explore Richard III, I think only like two disabled actors in Canada had actually played Richard. Which, like, to me, just like it, like sparked like a level of fury in me because I was like, is right there. Like it's already done. It's such a good part. That character's so interesting as a villain. It's also like a terrible disability trope. So I was like, but like it complicated feelings because like he's so delicious, but also he's so wrong all at the same time. And uh I was like, I keep saying I was in my multiverse era. My multiverse era has not ended, but like if I get back to that character exploration, there's something so interesting to me about what a multiverse offers because a multiverse gives you the opportunity to meet yourself, to acknowledge where your like strengths or your limitations are. And the potential for growth in that moment is like so big. So I knew that like I didn't want to lose all the good parts of what Richard III that Shakespeare wrote was. Like those speeches are so great and that character is so fun. But I wanted to give Richard the opportunity to meet himself or like to meet a version of himself. And and by doing that, I got to put two disabled actors on stage. So it like doubled the amount of disability representation in the piece, which is just like my low key goal in my playwriting is to get disabled bodies on stage. So like it was like check successful in that regard. And the other thing I'll say in terms of like my playwriting and this mission I'm on to get disabled bodies on stage is one of the reimaginings of Richard III is called Teenage Dick, and it's written by Mike Liu. And Mike Liu does not live with a disability, but he was collaborating with the actor who played the main character, who has cerebral palsy. And Mike Liu, in the introduction to Teenage Dick, is like, hey, the actor I was working with has cerebral palsy. And that is mentioned in this line, and this
Mhm.
line because of his physical disability. If you find another actor who has a different disability to play this part, these are the lines that you'll have to rewrite. And I was like to me, that just like cracked open the possibility because a lot of the time, where I feel like producers or directors in particular are like, oh, I can't find an
Yeah.
actor who only has one leg. Therefore, I hire an able bodied actor to like play this part. So for me, that's like such a beautiful and fun device that I've now started to incorporate in. It's just like, great, the important thing about this character is they're facing marginalization because of their disability. We don't have to be, or we can be specific within the play about what that disability is, but we can also create the freedom to rewrite it
Mhm.
so that a disabled body is in this role and you don't feel like you need to like supplement it with an able-bodied actor.
Patricia, when people are watching your work, and I love what you're doing, and we're going to have a great chat after this for sure. But when people are watching your work, what do you hope is the take-home message for them?
Like with Richard III in particular, I wanted folks, and we like perform in the middle of a public park. I wanted folks to just enjoy the show and think about how cool it was. It's just like I love a laugh. I love when pieces are funny. but it was like the audience reaction, and this was only the people that talked to me. If people didn't like it, they didn't come over and talk to me. But like the people who did like it, um, they were like, it was such a good piece. Like the actors were so phenomenal. I had such a great time in the theater. And then they have that moment where they're like, holy crap, you've shown me something new about disability, or you've changed my mind about disability. And that's the secondary piece where it's just like, first and foremost, let's like create something that's like great and awesome and all those things and rigorous and whatever. Um, and then like the added bonus is like, and you've shown me something, or like, and we've explored something new. So it's like I'm there to change minds, and I think that that's why we all do theater. We're there to extend empathy. We're there to show people things they might not be considering. Like we do live theater, and we assemble collectively to have a shared experience. Um, and it can be all the things. It can be delightful and wonderful and wondrous and teach you something without like scolding you or making you feel bad. Like I didn't stand up there and do a disability lecture. I did like a fun show where there was some multiversal fun. And then at the end of it, folks were like, ah, interesting.
Patricia, where can people learn more about you, your work, upcoming projects? Share with us whatever you're able to.
Yeah, I mean, like patriciaallison.ca is my website. And when I say that, I'm like, is that true? Yeah, we'll fact check it later. Or Shakespeare in the Ruff, or you can find me on Instagram at Instapatsy. Um, yeah.
Now, Patricia, I want to do a little bit of a get to know you section. Just whatever pops into your head first, okay?
hmm
What's a book you think everyone should read?
Oh, Project Hail Mary by Andy Weir. Oh, and Out on a Limb by Hannah Bonham Young. Out on a Limb by Hannah Bonham Young is the best disability representation I've ever read in a book, and it just so happens to be a romance novel, but don't bash it because it's incredible disability representation.
And are you a coffee or tea type of person?
I'm a huge coffee drinker. I drink too much coffee.
And what's a classic play you would love just to completely reinvent one day?
My new obsession, now that I've done Time of Athens, is Titus Andronicus. That's like next on my list.
And what's a small joy in your daily life that keeps you grounded?
I'm gonna be cheesy. I'm gonna say my wife. Is that a small joy or a big joy? She's amazing.
Eh. What's your go-to comfort food?
Oh, I mean, chips are like, I'm obsessed with chips, in particular salt and vinegar chips or Sour Patch Kids.
And what's a favorite color of yours that you just don't wear?
Oh, I wear all my favorite color. I used to have blue hair. I just cut out my blue hair. Orange. I never wear orange, but I love the color orange.
Hmm. And what's something about you that you can share with us that people would be surprised to learn?
Literally nothing. I overshare on the internet. I think that everyone knows probably too much about me.
And if you had to describe yourself in 3 words, what would you say?
Oh my God. Um, oh my God. No, life crisis.
Oh my God, no, and life crisis. Okay.
Cannot think of just 3 words. Yeah, I'll stick with that.
And if someone gave you a magic wand and you could give the world something tomorrow, what would you give them?
Oh my God, complicated. I was going to say an immune system, and I say that as someone who has a really crappy immune system. I would give everyone literally enough food and shelter just to live off of. Like it's a basic need.
I love that. And Patricia, out of all of the podcast interviews, shows, people running up to you on the street asking you for your autograph and selfies, what's one question you wish somebody asked you that they just never have?
Oh my God. I mean, no one ever asks me about my highest total on the Bop It Extreme. Do you remember that
I
toy
want to know.
from,
I know this toy. Yes, I want to know. What's the
yeah,
high?
you can only get to 250 rotations. And I discovered that by beating the Bop It Extreme when I was in high school, and no one ever asks me about it. So that's my opportunity to brag.
I love it. And Patricia, I have time for one last question for you today on Coffee with Chris. I really appreciate you being here with me today. Is what makes Patricia freaking Allison smile?
A lot of things. I friggin' love jokes. I like love corny jokes. I love basic jokes. I love dark humor. I'm very easy to make laugh.
Fantastic. That was the last question I had for you today on Coffee with Chris. Everyone out there, our fantastic guest, Patricia freaking Allison. If you Google it, it won't come up. You have to go Patricia Allison currently. We might
Yeah,
get her to change her middle name later on.
yeah.
But everyone out there, remember to smile to inspire and have yourselves a fantastic day. Again, our wonderful guest today was Patricia Allison. Thank you so much for your time today.
Thank you. This was awesome.